All right, this is 6-5, factoring with a lead coefficient. Okay, so what I mean by that, so far this is the pattern for factoring, this is the pattern for trinomials. Ax squared plus bx plus c, where you've been doing like x squared plus bx plus c, where b and c are integers. Today we're adding another integer in front of the quadratic term x squared. So when you have a coefficient of x squared, when your a is a number that's greater than 1, it's a little bit different, the process. Okay? All right. So let's pretend this is just like 2 times 3. Here's what it equals. 2 and 3 are the factors, and 2x and 6 is your product. Here we have 2 binomial factors. When you multiply them, you get 2x cubed squared plus 13x plus 15. If I am going to factor this, because this has a coefficient, it's a little bit different. It has a coefficient for the quadratic term. The first thing we're going to do, we're really combining 2 lessons, 6-4 and 6-6. We're still going to do x marks the spot. The first thing we do, we multiply the coefficient of the first term and the constant term. We multiply that together and we put that up top, and we're looking to get a product. Right? We're looking for what the product is there. Then I take my middle term, the coefficient, and I put it down below. I'm looking for my terms to add sum or difference. So just like we did before, only this time the middle term comes down, and instead of just taking the last term, the constant term, and putting it up top, I'm multiplying it by the lead coefficient. Now, what multiplies to 30 and adds to 13? Sadat?
10 and 3.
10 and 3. Positive 10, positive 3. Okay. So now we are going to continue to use the first and the last term. We still use these terms. 2x squared plus 15. So I'm using this and I'm using this. The middle term, however, I'm going to break up by this 3 and this 10. Only I'm going to add an x because it's really the coefficient. So it's plus 3x plus 10x. So I just add an x to it and I use that as my middle 2 terms. Doesn't this simplify to 13x? Okay, so really what we're finding here are the lead coefficients for the x term, the linear term. Yes?
So we're like reverse factoring, but is this it?
Hold up. Now, the next thing we do, we're going to go right back to what we did. Now we have 4 terms. We're going to factor by grouping. Okay? Group the first 2. Group the second 2. What can I factor out of 2x squared plus 3x? William? Okay, I can take out an x. And I'm left with what? William?
2x and 3.
Plus 3. Okay, what can I factor out of the next one? Oscar?
5.
Positive 5. And so what I'm left with, Oscar?
Is 2x plus 3.
Okay, so now what I have here is I can factor out my binomial factor, 2x plus 3, right? They're the same. And the leftovers become my second binomial factor, x plus 5. And so, isn't that what the answer is? Pause the recording and take notes if you need to. Okay, so I have a question is, when you do the X marks the spot, how do you get the product? I'm going to go over in yellow how I answering your questions. So I multiply the lead coefficient times the constant to get that 30. Okay, other questions? Yes.
Wait, so the answer was the question?
Well, yes. They just said, normally, last chapter we started with this. Really, how you're going to be given this, you'll be given this like this, and it will say, please factor. And you will get this just like this. Now, we can always double check our work by double distributing. This is the check. 2x times x is 2x squared plus 10x plus 3x plus 15. That gives us 2x squared plus 13x plus 15. And really, you should be double checking that you did it right. Huh?
The questions won't be the answer? It'll be like 2x squared.
So the question will look like this. Is everybody done with this? I'll show you in a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, is there any other questions for this? All right, so let's move on, and I'll show you what your questions are going to look like. Okay, your question's going to look like this and say factor it. So let's do it one more time together, and then we're going to practice it in pairs. Step 1. Okay. What do I have to do first? David.
GCF if there is one?
Is there a GCF?
No.
And I'm glad you said that. He remembered. Every time we factor, the first thing we have to do is check and see if there's a GCF. None. So we move on to the next step. Is it a binomial?
It's a trinomial.
It's a trinomial. Okay.
So
It's a trinomial. So we're going to use that. It has a lead coefficient. So what do I do?
you're not gonna group it. We're gonna start a trinomial. So
Somebody else? Rogelio?
Well, what you're going to do is you're going to multiply the constant on the end by the coefficient,
By the lead coefficient.
lead coefficient.
And that makes
That'll make 12.
positive 12. And I bring it over here. Okay. What also do I need? David?
the middle term, which is 8x,
And where do I put the 8?
in the sum compartment.
In the sum compartment. Good. Now, what multiplies to 12 and adds to 8? Let's go with Sydney.
6 and 2.
Positive 6, positive 2. Please identify signs, because you're going to need that. So now, how do I rewrite this? What stays the same? Rogelio.
Well, you're just going to stay the same with the 3x squared.
And,
That's changing is the middle terms.
okay, and what else is staying the same?
Oh, the 4 at the end. The
Good.
constant,
And then what am I putting in the middle?
plus 6x and plus 2x.
Okay. Next step. Oscar.
The next step you would do your parentheses, add your parentheses of your first
Group
group and
them.
your second group.
Oops. Okay. Next, please, Sydney in the back.
Next, you have to find like the GCF with each one.
Okay.
Well, I said like a like one.
Okay.
So for the first one, it's 3x times the quantity of x plus 2.
Good.
And then plus 2 times the quantity of x plus 2.
I'm factoring out a plus 2. And what's left?
X plus 2 times the quantity of 3x plus
What am I writing here?
Oh, x plus 2.
Okay. Okay, now, what do I factor out first? I guess it doesn't really matter what I do first, but we have a binomial factor. Christina?
X plus 2.
Okay. So one more time. Kiana, how do I check to see that I did it right?
You check by multiplying x times 3x.
Yeah, does that give me 3x squared? Does 2 times 2 give me 4?
Yeah.
Then I've got 6x and 5x. Wait, 2x is 8x in the middle. So it worked. So check yourself. Okay? Questions? All right, stop the recording. Pause the recording. You actually don't pause the recording. I'm going to go back to the next one. Okay. Now for you guys, now you're going to pause the recording and do the next two problems. All right, so now check your work. For number 1, you should have gotten 3x, the quantity of 3x plus 1 times the quantity of x minus 4. For number 2, you should have gotten the quantity of the quantity of 1x minus 2 times the quantity of 2x minus 5. Now, it doesn't matter if you didn't write 1x, if you just wrote x minus 2. Questions? Okay. Now, the one thing to remember is that you do have to, in the real situation, like right now, each night we've been doing each technique each night. Starting tomorrow, we're going to mix them all up, and you're going to have to be able to problem solve your way as to which way to factor. You're going to do the problem, you're going to you're going to write down the problem, check for GCF. After you get your GCF, once you continue on, you're going to decide, do I have a binomial, a trinomial, or more than 3? Depending on what you have is what method you'll end up using. So, here's an example. It's the last form of factoring. And here's an example of something you might see in your book. So, step 1, what would I do? Nicole?
You have to find your GCF.
Which is?
2.
2.
Yeah.
More than that. 2.
2x.
2x. So I factor out the 2x. I GCF out the 2x. Oops. And now I start with my x marks a spot. What am I putting on the top? Peyton? 30. And on the bottom?
-13.
Okay. And so I have, what is it? -10, -3. So I use my first term, 3x squared. I use my last term, 10. Now I'm going to divide my middle term up to minus 3x minus 10x. Okay. Now I'm going to factor by grouping. Now notice what I did. I took that negative inside and I'm adding a plus sign. Oops. And now what can I divide out of the first pair? David?
-3x.
But just 3x. And then I'm left with,
X. And then minus x.
nope, minus 1. -3x divided by -3x equals 1. And what can I factor out of the next one? Rogelio?
-10.
And what's left?
X minus 1.
Okay, and so my answer, now be careful here. What's the answer? Well, let's just take this part, just this part, yeah. Nicole?
Oh, it becomes the quantity of x minus 1 times the quantity of 3x minus 10, and then you have to put back your 2x, so it becomes 2x times the quantity of x minus 1 times the quantity of 3x minus 10.
Okay. Don't forget about when you GCF something, that is part of your answer. You're only continuing to factor what's left. So that's this part right here, but you've got to include this right here. This is your full answer. Okay, questions? Pause the recording or stop the recording.